Hey, FlimsyLunchTray here, and welcome to World of Warships. As today, we're going to be doing an upgraded commander build video on the Tier 7 Soviet Russian destroyer, the Minsk. So we're going to be looking over her armor scheme, her playstyle, upgrades, modules, and of course the commander, which the original commander I've had on the ship since yesterday's video. I've already moved off onto another ship. But I've put another one on. But let's talk about the playstyle of the Minsk, and that is you have three types of destroyers in the game. You have your gunboat destroyers, which is actually what Minsk is. You have a hybrid, and then you have torpedo destroyers. And a hybrid would be a mix of your gunboat and torpedo destroyers. She's not a torpedo destroyer because her torps are 4 kilometers, and her guns excel and being 130mm guns, where you can even be citadeling light cruisers even further at range depending on tier. So let's go ahead and look at the armor. So it's pretty standard for a tier 7 destroyer, covered in 16mm plating, and you have 10mm plating throughout the ship, and of course as well on your turrets. So it is possible if an enemy destroyer is focusing your turrets, you can't easily have your turrets knocked out on the ship. So just be mindful of that. Moving on, let's go ahead and talk about the modules. So there's no upgrades on the main battery. What you see is what you get. So right now means we have a 5-second reload time. Stock 180 return time is 18.6 seconds, equivalent to like a heavy cruiser, if you will. So some things we can do to get that down. Maximum HE shell damage 1900, maximum AP shell damage 2500. Now your hull is what you're going to want to upgrade first. You're going to go from hull A to hull B. You can see there's going to be a slight buff on your health pool, even without survivability expert. So it's 13,800 stock, and then you go up to 15,100. And as a gunboat destroyer, you want to have as much health as possible, since you're often not concealed as much unless you're using some smoke screens, some island coverage. You're going to want to build into your survivability. And also you see you get a pretty significant buff to your AA, but it's still mediocre. You can do okay ish against tier 6s, but against 8s you don't you're a punching bag if you will. Your torpedoes, your stock torpedoes have a slightly longer reload time. They do less damage, but they're actually faster. They have a 70 knot speed versus the upgraded torpedoes, which have a 65 knot speed. But you can see you shave a couple seconds off with the reload time, 98 seconds. And the maximum damage jumps up to almost 18,000 from where you were before, 15,100, so you're definitely going to want to upgrade those. Then your gunfire control system, you go from 11.1 to an upgraded 12.2. So first I'm going to recommend you go for the hull, then do the gunfire control system, then your torpedoes. Torpedoes are more for your YOLO moments, or maybe you catch a destroyer off guard like we did in yesterday's video. That was quite fun to do. Now propulsion, I didn't talk about this in the video yesterday, but this is one of the ship's strengths. You have a 43 knot speed. If you take Sierra Mike flag, it's going to put you over 45.2 knots without using engine boost. With engine boost, you're going to be up over 48 knots. So that is really good here. So definitely utilize that. It's a great compatibility for gunboat destroyers in the game, especially when you're open gunboating and having really great speed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as time goes on. Moving on, as I get some water from my throat. For the first slot, I'm going to upgrade the main armaments modification 1. This is going to reduce the risk of your main battery and torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Your main battery and torpedo tube survivability will go up by plus 50%, and repair time if either one of those should get knocked out is reduced by negative 20%. You wouldn't do this. Is this for secondary AA, and you don't have secondary and your AA sucks. And your magazine modification is reduces this ship's chance of detonating by negative 70%. But you just take Charlie combat signal when you're playing random ranked clan battles, and it completely eliminates the risk of your ship's magazine detonating. So let's go for the main armaments, because it is possible to get them knocked out, right? For the second slot, for your standard upgrade, I would suggest taking the engine room protection, which is what I'm running on the ship now. Reduces risk of your engine and steering gears becoming incapacitated by negative 20%. Your repair time of your engine or steering gears, if they do become incapacitated, is negative 20%. Really good to have. If you like playing Minsk a lot, then I'm going to recommend you take the special upgrade, which is going to add plus 30% on your consumable action time for your engine boost. So that's going to put you up to 150 seconds, I believe, if I remember correctly. Otherwise, it's just 120 seconds as is. Third slot, you have two options. For now, what you see that I have is the aiming systems modification. And the main reason I take this is for the maximum main battery shell dispersion being negative 7%, meaning you're getting a slightly tighter horizontal and vertical dispersion, which is nice, but it's going to be between maybe 4 to 9 meters on each of those. So this means you're getting slightly more accurate salvos, but honestly, probably with how slow the turret traverse is, it's probably leaning a little bit more towards the main battery traverse speed. That's a big downer on this line. So right now you can see it is 18.6 seconds for 180-degree turn time. So we're just going to go ahead, I'll just demount it, so I'll save it later for something else. We'll go ahead and put on the main battery modification 2. And you're going to see that we're going to be improved to 16.1 seconds, which is a bit more comfortable. Especially when you're a destroyer player and you're using rudder shift and you're out turning your guns. So probably this is what you're going to be wanting to run in general, unless you want those slightly more accurate salvos. You know, you also saw the citadels we were getting on a tier 6 cruiser in yesterday's game. Fourth slot, propulsion modification 1. Tied with your speed of, I mean, right now it's 45.2 knots, but you can get it over 48 knots. To time taken to reach a full engine power and accelerating, negative 50%. This tends to be the life of a gunboat destroyer. You're deaccelerating, you're reaccelerating. So being able to just completely juke salvos is quite nice, completely avoiding damage. For steering gears is a little bit more of maybe you're mitigating in damage, but you are still taking hits. You have a 3.7 second rudder shift time. It's not terrible in that regard, but it's just not the best. And your turning circle radius is 690 meters. So I would recommend the propulsion out of that in general. Looking at your armament, so you have an 8% chance of causing fire on target. Now we can bump that up with combat signals up to 9%, adding both of those. The armor penetration capacity is 22 millimeters, which means you're basically going to pin all same tier destroyers. Now when you go up, facing some other destroyers at tier 9, if you get bottom tier, there's going to be some that you're just not going to pin the sides of. So then you'll be switching to AP, so do be mindful of that. It needs to have an 807 meters second travel time. And it's the same as well for the armor piercing, which can do some very big damage numbers, again, as you saw us citadeling a light cruiser yesterday with these 130 millimeter guns. So they just have a greater capacity of penetration. Torpedoes. So we've talked a little bit about them. What you see here in addition is 1.3 kilometer detectability range. So that is not bad. It's okay. You know, these are 65 knot torpedoes, and basically people should know for the most part that your torpedoes are coming if you're YOLOing them, since you only have a 4 kilometer torpedo range. But with those upgraded torpedoes, of course, you almost do 18,000 damage. So you know, if you're YOLOing a destroyer, then you only really need to dump one rack off versus all 8 torpedoes, 2x4 rack. Depth charges 2,400. 2 charges, only 6 bombs in a charge, 40-second reload time. So there's not a lot of depth charges that you get per charge. So just be mindful of that. Where, you know, maybe these American destroyers, a couple others, you get more bombs in a charge. So you want to try to do what you can to make sure you're on top of that enemy submarine when you start dropping. Consumable wise, standard damage control party, action time 5 seconds, cooldown time 40 seconds. You get access to the smoke generator. So you have a 20-second action time, smoke screen dispersion time of 85 seconds, a cooldown time of 160 seconds. So basically, you're halfway through the smoke by the time it dissipates before the next one is available to use. Number of consumables 3, kind of like when I was talking about Leningrad's smoke last week, or I guess maybe it was even 2 weeks ago. It's not, you don't primarily rely on the smoke like maybe like the British or the American destroyers. It's only to use when needed. Otherwise, you're more focusing on an open gunboat playstyle. Engine boost we've talked about. If you were to take the second slot, engine boost modification 1 to get you up to 150 second action time. Your cooldown time is 120 seconds. Number of consumables 3. So this is really helpful when you need to get around the map or you're just open gunboating. Again, one of the strengths of Minsk and having such good speeds. Combat signal wise, probably what I would run just in general would be something like this. So you have your det, you're increasing your speed, you're reducing the cooldown time on your consumables. So you can see now down to 152 seconds, 114 seconds, and 38 seconds. Getting some extra fire chance. If we have to ram something, we are going to be causing 50% more damage, and we're going to take 20% less damage when ramming. So I would just recommend this. You don't really need to take all the others. Now, in terms of our commander, there's several things to look at here, but I'm going to recommend a pretty straightforward build here. Now, again, note that I've talked about that this is a gunboat destroyer. Gunboat destroyers do best at range. You don't tend to go for concealment, and you build around the guns in that you're going to be detected more majority of the time. So in starting off, there's going to be 3 skills I want to recommend that you should take first. The first skill being the preventive maintenance, reducing the risk of the main turrets, torpedo tubes, steering gears, and engine becoming incapacitated by negative 30%. For a 3-point commander, I'm going to recommend Last Stand. Your ship remains partially able to sustain speed and maneuverability with the engine and steering gears incapacitated. Tends to be the life of a gunboat destroyer that you'll, generally speaking, maybe not every match, but you will have times where one or both of these will be knocked out in your playstyle. And then for a 6-point commander, I would recommend the Survivability Expert. HP increase for each ship tier plus 350, so times 7. So if I take it off, you know we were looking at 15,100 earlier. Now you're up to 17,550. Okay, these 3 skills are pretty much mandatory for you to be running here on the Minsk, at least in my opinion. Now with the playstyle of Minsk, you don't get to stealth torpedo, you know, in the comparison to something like the Leningrad. So normally I do recommend concealment on destroyers, but with your gunboat destroyers, the need becomes not so much. So I'm going to just say don't take concealment expert is my general recommendation here. 7.5 at tier 7 is not abysmal. I mean, it is poor, but you're not playing for close encounters. You're playing more at range and maybe damage farming and lining up those shots, utilizing islands to get closing in on the target, or taking advantage of enemy smoke screens like how we took advantage of that GIGABYTE in yesterday's video. So after a 6-point, what would I recommend after this point? Well, there's a few different ways you could go starting off depending on what you want your next skill to be. Probably what I would suggest is maybe just go ahead and pick up your main battery and AA expert. This is going to extend your main battery firing range up to 14.6, meaning you're a bit annoying to deal with if you do desire and want to go ahead and open up that range at the start. Otherwise, if there's a couple other skills you'd rather build up in first, then I would say, go ahead and take your adrenaline rush. So as you lose hit points, your guns are reloading a little bit faster, your torpedoes are reloading a little bit faster. Then maybe you're just wanting to go ahead and build into your reload time, and not so much for the AA damage, but for the reload time. These guns have a 5-second reload time right now, but if we take the main battery and AA specialist, you get a bump down to 4.8, and your AA defense gets a slight buff. It was before, it's pretty bad, 134 to 147. So yeah, you're not taking it for the AA, you're taking it for the guns. then I would probably be like, yeah, after that point, then I probably would really recommend going for your main battery and AA expert to get that 14.6 kilometer gun range. And then, let's leave that up. Then probably after that, I would say take your Fearless Brawler. Reduces main battery load time while your ship remains detected by the enemy. So, right, it's 4.8 now. So then just take that what it says 10%, right? So take 0.48 seconds off. So you're rocking like 4.32 second reload time. So 4.3, 4.4 second reload time. So that's actually really good, especially when you're open gunboating, right? And then for a last point skill, probably I'm going to say, yo, take the main battery traverse speed plus 15%. So then now your 180 turn time is 14 seconds versus being 16.1 seconds. Now, if you're okay with how the guns are and being that 16.1 second 180 turn time, then alternatively, I would recommend taking the incoming fire alert or running a battle salvo fired at your ship from a distance of more than 4.5 kilometers. So usually if the main battery traverse speed is good, then this is a typical gunboat build I would recommend. But it's kind of brutal with these Russian destroyers, so maybe you're leaning to wanting to have grease the gears. And if you like the Minsk playing it so much, you have several commanders, such as the one that I have on Ognivoy now, where you have a grease the gears improved enhanced skill of a plus 20% rather than the plus 15%. So that is something to consider as well. But in general, this is the build I would recommend tanking here on the Minsk. You know, once you get to this point, I mean, you can really go whatever you want to first. Probably what I would do is, you know, maybe I'm not too, as I'm feeling my way through the ship, I might just go and take a Rune Rush first, and I'd probably go about this route here. But you can mix and match, but in general, this is what I'm going to recommend you. I don't see so much a benefit for the other skills that you have here, you know. So you can ask if you want my opinion on something I haven't covered, but this is a pretty solid gunboat build for a tier 7 destroyer, especially being the Minsk. So I did that video in pretty good timing. It's not too complex in terms of the playstyle and what the Minsk offers. She's a decent tier 7 destroyer in my opinion, as long as you recognize that she is gunboat. You're not trying to play her for torps, and you're not aggressively pushing cap objectives. You know, like we let enemy team make the first move on the cap. Then if we feel appropriate, then we'll make a move on the cap. But she's not the first line of defense destroyer in YOLOing in. She plays really well with other destroyers in the area that have maybe better concealment. But in general, she's much more of a gunboat farming, harassing enemy cruisers, destroyers, so on and so forth. So if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give a thumbs down. Subscribe if you do want to see more. If you're subscribed, thanks so much. I would appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time. Take care.